Conflict of Heroes Guadalcanal. Oh, I've been waiting for a long time to play this one. Mainly because it was announced on the website of Academy Games a long time ago. From time to time, I will go on the website, look at the beautiful image, and wonder, when will I be able to play? Finally, that time has come. Conflict of Heroes, one of the most beloved wargame system of the last decade, or say of the modern era of wargaming. Now, after we did a lot of fighting on the Eastern Front in that system, we get to try the system on the Pacific Front, which is a theater of operations that has often been depicted in war games, mainly from the naval and air point of view, which makes perfect sense. The tactical ground combat has been less investigated by war games. So what we have here is like one of the most solid and beloved war game systems of the last couple of years, paired with a topic that, while not one that has been completely unexplored, it still feels fresh because it hasn't been overdone in wargaming. So very exciting stuff here. Let me tell a little bit about the game and how it plays, and then I'll tell you what I think about it. Like other sets in the Conflict of Heroes system, Guadalcanal comes with several mounted boards that are used to represent the terrain of the various firefights described in the scenario book. These are very nice looking, very detailed, evocative, and yet still very playable. The terrain is pretty problematic because, well, there's a lot of stuff. There are changes in elevation, rivers, a lot of jungle that, well, sure, offers protection, but also limits visibility, so it's not always easy to hit at a distance, and also makes movement problematic. So there's another board. We have two more, and sometimes the boards are used individually. A single board defines the terrain for the entire confrontation. At times you combine several of them together. Again, very attractive, very evocative, definitely very high quality, as we have come to expect from the Conflict of Heroes line. Nice. Look at this one. Very nice. Now, well, let's keep this one out, actually, so that we can talk about how the game works. Actually, speaking of terrain, you also have several overlays that can be put on the map based on the scenario instructions to alter the terrain depending on the scenario that is being played. And also these are double-sided, so here we have a village, for example, so more features that can be added. Combat units are represented by these nice, large, thick counters. There's a lot of information on them, but if you're familiar with the system, then no problem. And in general, this is these counters are very intuitively organized once you know what all the numbers are for. The players will spend action points to activate the units, so they can perform actions. This is the cost in action points to activate a unit for combat. This is the cost to activate the unit for movement. There are two fire attack values here. One, the one on top, to be used against soft targets, the other one against armor. And then we also have range. You can fire above your range, but there is a penalty for doing so. Up to that range, then it's just regular, and also if you're firing just into an adjacent hex, there is an advantage. And here we have the defense value. The higher number is for when the unit is attacked from the front. Units are always facing a hex side, and the front is represented by the three the X sides in front of the unit. So if the attack comes from there, then you use the higher defense value. If it's coming from the back or the flank, you use the lower defense value. Pretty simple, pretty basic. Players alternate spending actions, spending action points. You also have command points, which are sort of like a wild point. You can use them to activate units that are already activated, to activate units without spending them, to get bonuses. A lot of things that you can do. But the idea is still the same. I activate a unit to perform an action, then you activate a unit to perform an action. We go back and forth, and I can choose a certain point to spend my unit completely to start activating another unit, or I can simply
I can simply keep activating a unit until it has no action points left. Again, I can use command points to supplement actions, to perform actions with units that couldn't. I could also spend all the action points of one of my units to and spend it to perform a special action, so like out of order, out of turn. To move a unit, you spend the corresponding number of action points, and the basic cost is that one, and that is what you spend to enter a clear terrain hex, and then entering other types of terrain causes extra expenditures. Or you can spend points to attack. And when you're fighting against a unit, it is super simple. You check that you have line of sight. You then roll 2 dice, 2d6, 2 six-sided dice. You add your firepower, choosing the one that applies to the target you're fighting against. You apply possible other modifiers, such as, for example, bonuses if you have purchased those by spending command points. And if your total is equal to or higher than the defense value of the target, taking into account the one for the angle at which you're firing and possible modifiers for the terrain that the defender is in. So if at the end your modified total attack is equal to or higher than the modified total defense, you score a hit. When you score a hit, the defender draws a counter to represent the type of damage. And this is one of the things that is really cool about Conflict of Heroes, that a hit does not always generate the same type of damage. So usually you would have a pool of damage counters for armor or vehicles in general, and a pool of damage counters for infantry. But in this game you had 2 pools of damage counters for infantry. That is, the American damage is different from the Japanese damage. Really cool. Different combinations of things that may happen to represent training capabilities and different reaction to danger and to taking hits. In fact, to represent the fact that the Japanese were particularly ferocious, particularly determined, there are several no-hit counters here that represent the fact that yes, they may have taken a hit, but actually they're still fighting just as if they hadn't, and so there is no direct effect. Now, usually the damage that you take is real. You need to spend a rally action to try to get rid of the damage counter that you received, and use an action to try to rally. You need to roll 2 dice and roll equal to or higher than the rally number printed on the damage counter that you drew. And again, very important, the damage is usually secret. You place it under the counter of the unit, and you only reveal it when the information that is contained in the counter matters. For example, this counter here modifies the movement and defense value. Other counters may prevent me from attacking or moving, may prevent me or give me penalties for attacking, and so on and so forth. So you reveal it only when it's relevant. What happens when a Japanese unit draws a no-hit, which means no effect, but the American player doesn't know that, so the Japanese player still places it under it without revealing what it is, and you reveal it following the general idea only when it applies. That is, when the unit takes a second hit, that would usually remove that one, then you reveal, cuckoo, surprise, yabba-dabba-doo, that's not what you expected. And so the Japanese player draws another one. Basically, the American player, when scoring the second hit, discovers that the first one didn't matter, and what was believed to be the second hit, in truth, is the first, which, for all we know, may be another no hit. Who knows? So it's really neat that you do not really know how much fight the enemy units still have, if you're the American player, and you do not know how many hits exactly you need to score. The units may be very close to breaking or absolutely fresh, you just have no idea. Really cool idea. Other than that, most of the things that you expect from Conflict of Heroes remain the same. Again, the general engine, the general idea is the same. Another difference, however, ones that I like very much, is based on a new concept, which is the Bushido points, which affect the number of command action points that the Japanese player will receive. As we said, that is based on scenario instructions, so they tell you how many you have, in each scenario. And so, for example, the American player will receive, say, in this scenario, 8 command points each turn that can be spent for a variety of things. Also, something important, when you take casualty, you place the units that were actually removed on your command action track, and that reduces the number of command points that you have. You do not get to put it where it would belong. Normally, you put it in the first open space that you have after you've started filling up those boxes with removed units. The Japanese, again, to determine how strong-willed they are, do not lose command action points when they take hits. So you do not place Japanese units on the command action point track as you would normally. It just doesn't affect their will to fight in that sense, or their ability to use command points. Usually they don't get many to start with, but they may increase them using Bushido. Bushido is a value that changes, can be positive or negative, so it can be up to -9 or +1. It will shift throughout the game. And each scenario will tell you what the Japanese player must do to earn Bushido points, and what it is that causes the player to lose Bushido points. And the Bushido will affect the number of command points. Say, a scenario may say, in this scenario, each turn the Japanese player receives 4 command points plus or minus Bushido. That means that if you have 3 Bushido that turn, you effectively have 7 command points, which can be a lot. And what do you need to do to get them? It completely depends on the scenario. It is an abstract but pretty effective way to simulate the different military philosophy, the philosophy of honor that the Japanese had at this time. And it works very well. In some scenarios, you gain Bushido if your units are destroyed in close combat or destroyed by fire at a short range. So that simulates pretty much honorable suicide charges. You show that you're brave, you show that you don't fear the enemy, you inspire the people that are still in the battlefield. So maybe you'll send some of your less valuable units in those heroic, if suicidal charges, and that will give a Bushido boost to the remaining people. Other cases may be destroying enemy units that gives you Bushido, taking control of enemy objectives, but also there are things that are dishonorable and will lower the morale of the Japanese, and for example, losing certain units in certain other situations, losing control of certain locations. So in a certain sense, it shows that the military training of the Americans makes them more reliable, more standard. You know more or less what they'll be able to do and how actions will affect them. As for the Japanese, there is a set of philosophical nuances that go around the main system that makes them go up and down, and makes playing them very fun, very exciting, because they play very differently from scenario to scenario depending on the different requirements or the different rules that will affect the shifting up or down of the Bushido marker. So really cool idea. Other than that, familiar ideas. We have a nice firefight book with a lot of firefights, a lot of different situations. You will have a lot of fun exploring these situations, a lot of variety, because with different terrain modified by different overlays and different victory conditions, that also generates different dynamics, will push the action along different lines, from just brutal fights, attempts to take control of enemy objectives, attempts to evacuate. And there's a very strong emphasis on infantry, as you may expect from the theme. There are almost no armored units. There are some, but again, really few of them.
Academy Games is definitely not one of the most prolific publishers of games out there, but it has to be one of the best ones because their productions are solid. Maybe that's the point. They concentrate on coming up with 1 or 2 designs a year, but that is all good stuff. Production is always impeccable. Design-wise, their games are strong, and Conflict of Heroes Guadalcanal is no exception. Solid game with an impeccable production. The components are absolutely excellent. The manual is very well done as usual. It is program instruction. If there is one person out there that never played a Conflict of Heroes games and wants to start from this set, that person will not have any problems, because while the game can have a certain degree of complexity when you take into account all of its aspects, it can also be learned in increments. So you can play some of the scenarios with the basic stuff, with infantry only, and then the rules will teach you more stuff, and so you get to play the larger and more complex scenarios. So the game is very easy to learn, easy to pick up, and at the end, almost without knowing it, you will be playing a game of a certain degree of complexity. So it is very friendly to novices in wargaming. Now, as for people that already know the Conflict of Heroes system, I can tell you that this, to me, solves the paradox of sequels slash new implementations of a system. The paradox is a well-known one. If I liked a movie and the sequel is coming out and I'm interested in the sequel, it is because I like the first movie. If I completely dislike, probably I will not want to see the sequel. So I really like the first movie. That means that there are certain things of that movie that I want to find in the sequel. However, if there are too many of those and not much else, then the sequel turns out to be a remake. So when I'm going to see a sequel or playing a game in the same system, etc., I want to find the same things that I liked in the earlier implementations of the system, idea, movie, etc. I want to find a lot of similarities, but I also want something different. So there is that delicate balance that directors, writers of books within a genre, game designers had to find between enough sameness that connects the new installment with the previous ones and enough new things to keep me interested and so that the experience feels fresh and exciting and innovative and not just a rehash of old stuff. Guadalcanal does that. Guadalcanal has all the things that I liked in Conflict of Heroes, especially the second edition of the rules, with enough new stuff that the experience feels fresh and new. All the things that I like in Conflict of Heroes, that is the subtleties that come from different activations, different limited resources that you have to activate units, command points, etc. The intuitive nature of combat and movement, the large range of effects generated by damage counters, all those things that I like from the previous Conflict of Heroes games are here. That's great. And also I have a new setting, one that again I haven't played many games in this setting that emphasize tactical ground combat, so check, I have that thing that I like. But most importantly, I have new mechanical elements here. The rules that have been added to depict Japanese military philosophy work very well game-wise, keep the experience fresh, and they even add variety, not just when you compare this to previous sets in Conflict of Heroes, so this feels different, but they add a lot of variety from scenario to scenario, because there are different embodiments, different incarnations that philosophy will take when projected on a certain battlefield, when applied to a certain operation. So in some cases it is suicide attacks, in some cases it is suicidal defenses to the last man. So there are different things that will happen, and the game will feels very thematic, feels very historical, and also the theme, that historical flavor, is very well connected with the mechanics. It doesn't feel like you're doing homework to make sure that the game feels historical. The mechanics have been smartly designed so that simply as you are playing the game by the rules within the mechanics, pursuing your own objectives as a player, trying to meet the victory conditions and to exploit the things that your units can do, simply by thinking ludically, you will end up playing historically. The game will end up following along historical lines, which is something that I like very much. When you end up repeating history, or in any case, playing historically without even realizing it, without trying, just because the game is such that it channels your action in that direction, so that the historical experience emerges organically from gameplay. Gameplay is fun, it's highly interactive, it's very organic. It is also solitaire friendly, as every implementation of Conflict of Heroes has, thanks to the hidden elements, to the unpredictable elements mainly coming from a lot of die rolls, of course, but also the variable damages that the counters will produce. Of course, if you're playing solitaire, there is a hidden factor that is missed. That is the fact that you should not know what the damage of the opponent exactly is. Here with the hit counters of the Japanese, that may be a problem, I guess, for some people. So you do miss that aspect. It is still solitaire friendly, maybe a little less than other systems, that are implementations of the system, because there really is surprise in thinking that you have damage a Japanese unit, and that unit actually is just as functionally effective as it was originally, although it may have been numerically reduced. But it's no big deal. You can still play the game solitaire. It is still fun and exciting. Overall, Guadalcanal, the Pacific 1942, an excellent, a superb implementation of the Conflict of Heroes system, may just be my favorite implementation of the system actually. If nothing else, because the theme is more original and less frequently represented in war games than Eastern Front is. Really, give it a try. Guadalcanal, the Pacific 1942 is absolutely a great game.